Welcome back to 34O, where we discuss love, intimacy, and what it takes to create and build connection. In this episode, we're meeting Erik. Erik has walked a path with love, intimacy, and masculinity that many men will recognize. He speaks honestly about vulnerability, desire, shame, and what it means to build something lasting. First, you'll hear his story, and I'll guide us through a series of questions with him. And let's begin. What he wanted to give, he never knew how to ask for. Erik had always fallen in love quickly, like an electric wave that swept away all doubt, filled him with meaning, made the world feel new. But just as quickly as it had arrived came the fall, a slippery slope down into routine, adaptation, silence. It was never conscious, just patterns. Erik grew up with parents who are still married today, even though they probably should have separated before he even learned how to read. Early on, he learned that being well behaved was better than being seen, that listening was safer than speaking. And that desire, especially strong desire, was something to suppress. His first love didn't want sex. His second, who became his wife, did, but only at first. After the children, the bedroom grew quiet. And he, who longed for intimacy but didn't know how to ask for it, withdrew into screens, into porn, in search of variation, surprise, the feeling that something was still alive inside of him. Then she came, the big one, the one who left him breathless, not because she was perfect, but because she was free. She took him to places he hadn't dared to ask for. Their sex was electric, animalistic, sacred. She allowed him to be everything he thought he had to hide. And yet, that's also where it began to fall apart. When she wanted openness, he shut down. When she asked to be held in her darkness, he didn't know how to carry someone who didn't ask to be carried. He adapted so much that he lost sight of what he himself felt. And when it all finally cracked, the silence came crashing in. I don't know if we have what it takes to build a life together, he had whispered. She didn't answer. She just looked at him, as if the answer had already arrived. And yet, in all of that, something grew. A kind of courage, an ability to stay, to dare to say, I don't just want passion, I want grounding. His current relationship was different. She's solo poly, called herself a relationship anarchist. They kept sex and love separate, building something despite the differences. Sometimes it feels like quiet acceptance, other times like he's playing a role he hasn't chosen. Sex isn't like it was before, but it's safe. The love is there, the warmth is there. He's starting to understand that what he had always searched for may never have been just the woman in front of him, but just the permission to be himself, with all his rough edges, all his longing, and all the tenderness he has carried without knowing where to put. He started to talk more, not perfectly, but honestly. And sometimes in the moments where they're close, without performing, he could feel it again. 1 plus 1 becomes something more. I don't want to play anymore. They were sitting on the porch, blankets over their legs, the evening sun spilled gold across coffee cups and silences. She looked out over the treetops. He looked at her. I need to say something, he said, almost whispering. She turned her gaze toward him, not rushed, just very present. I've realized that I often disappear at the beginning of a relationship, or rather, in the middle. When the first passion fades, that's when I start to play, to adapt, to do what I think is needed to keep closeness. But at the same time, I lose myself. She said nothing, just held her gaze steady and soft. With you, I try to stay in myself, but sometimes I don't know how to. Just be in my body without wanting something more. A rush, a sign, a signal that I'm enough. She slowly ran her thumb across her cup. So you escape into something else. Born, thoughts, fantasies. It's not that I don't want to be here. I just want to avoid the sting of not feeling good enough. I don't want to play anymore. Not in sex, not in love. She took a deep breath. Then let's stop playing and start being. There was a silence again, but something had lifted. Not because everything was fixed, but because it had been spoken. And sometimes that's the beginning of intimacy. Not when you understand, but when you say it. Just the body, just me. I lay on the bed, alone. No sounds, no screen, nothing to look at. He wanted to try, to masturbate without stimulation, to feel his body without needing to come, just to be there. His breath came first, then a hand across his chest, a slow stroke over the skin. It felt unfamiliar, almost embarrassing, even though no one was watching. He noticed how his thoughts wanted to run off to images, scenarios. But he stayed, moved his hand slowly over his stomach, held the pressure over his heart a little longer. His pulse was calm, nothing happened, but something was felt. It wasn't arousal, it was something else, presence, acceptance, that he was allowed to exit without performing, that his body didn't have to be a machine for pleasure, but a place for connection. He closed his eyes, touched his thighs, his hips, just to feel. For the first time in a long while, he didn't get hard, and for the first time, that felt like something good. He took a deep breath and felt he had started to come home, not to another, but to himself. Welcome to the show, Erik. So, Erik, how would you describe your journey when it comes to love and intimacy?
It was amazing to fall in love when I was young, but as far as I can remember, I didn't put love before other things in life like I do today. I had a couple of hobbies then that were important to me, and I was quite occupied by them. During the last few years, I guess you can say that personal development and relation development have become my main hobbies, which makes the love and intimacy different, more explorative and deeper. Intimacy has become something broader.
What did intimacy mean to you when you were younger?
I may be hard on myself, but I think intimacy used to mean mostly sex to me. And I've always really been into sex. In my early relationships, I liked it or needed it a lot more than my girlfriends. But I think they had preferred if our intimacy had been different. I wish I or we had talked more about our different wants and needs. But instead, I felt dirty that my sex interest was so much bigger than this, and I hid myself and I watched a lot of porn. This made me feel even dirtier. I felt a lot of shame. As a result, porn became an addiction to me.
Have you ever felt like you had to perform a certain kind of masculinity? What did that look like for you?
The way to make babies, or whatever you call that, have I guess always been like the core of sex to me. For me as a man, this means erection, penetration, and orgasm. When I started dating after my marriage, I thought that if I will not have a hard erection or if I will not ejaculate, a woman would not be happy with me as a sex partner. I felt the same even if the woman didn't easily reach orgasms herself. This feels silly now when I say it, but there's still something here that makes me a bit uneasy about this.
Can you recall a moment when something shifted, when you started seeking deeper connection?
It wasn't until I was almost 50 years old that I got into a relationship where I was challenged and encouraged as a partner in ways that made me understand what it really meant to love, to listen and to be there for her, but also search inside myself for my inner feelings and to dare to be vulnerable. By doing this, we could develop together, and I could also develop as an individual in ways I had never been close to before.
What does emotional safety mean to you, both within yourself and with a partner?
To me, it means to be honest and open with myself and with my partner, and to accept and get acceptance of who you are. To build a trust that we are always open with our feelings and that we are met with curiosity in whom we are, but also that we may change over time. To not be afraid of change. We need change and development in life.
How has your relationship to vulnerability changed over the years? Has it felt easy, terrifying, or maybe liberating?
Generally, I think I have always been a rather vulnerable person, but in some areas, as with the porn addiction, I was absolutely terrified. Now it's liberating to finally talk about it.
Have you ever been in a situation where you longed to be met emotionally but weren't? And what did you in that case do?
Well, going back to the porn addiction again, I was in a couple of relationships where I brought it up, but wasn't emotionally met. They said they couldn't approve of this behavior, and if I had to do it anyway, I had to hide it from them. And I didn't blame them. I didn't feel that I deserved to be emotionally met.
How do you experience the tension between desire and emotional connection?
Emotional connection for sure takes my desire to higher levels. Without emotional connection, desire is difficult for me. But my primary needs to feel desire, I think, is to feel safe, confident, and calm.
Have you ever felt ashamed of your needs, either emotionally, sexually, or relationally?
Emotionally, I'm still on my journey of knowing myself, to explore my emotional needs. It is, or at least has been, difficult for me to raise my emotional needs. I quite often get the question, what are your needs? I'm not sure if this has to do with shame though. And sexually, I've talked about the porn thing. Relationally, I've been totally stuck with the thought that a relationship should be lifelong, that anything else is a failure. There have been so many times that I've been thinking, is this relation good enough? Or do I want out of it? I was very ashamed of that thought, and I almost never talked about it with my partners. I used to fantasize a bit about parallel partners, but I would never be unfaithful, and I could never dream about bringing that up for discussion. But then, a few years ago, I met someone who brought polyamory up to me, and I realized that it was clearly a need deep inside of me. It was something I had to explore.
In your view, what does men today most need to unlearn when it comes to intimacy?
We don't need to perform and show our masculinity. Instead, we need to be more present, be more patiently inviting, and create a safe and comfortable space. But actually, I'm a man and I need the same thing, a conversation that is loving and tender, which creates this safe and comfortable space. That's what really turns me on too. I'm not just interested in women. I don't know if that's why I'm looking more for a mutual feel and understanding in a relationship rather than the female and male roles. I also think a lot of men would find a greater pleasure, both for themselves and for their partners, in searching for a flow or a presence instead of thinking of intimacy and sex as an act with an ending to reach orgasm. The best intimacy for me goes on and on for a long day or night. Passionate sex, yes, but also more than that. A lot of the time is conversational and just tender closeness. But it is all within one big intimacy bubble where we are being present with each other. It was perhaps a change in mindset from sex to intimacy that was a key for me to reach this level of physical and emotional pleasure.
What practices or experiences have helped you grow in your relationship to yourself and others?
For me, it's mostly that I've become more curiously met and accepted. This has made me open up and be vulnerable about things I haven't dared to say before. When allowing yourself and your partner to grow and change, this can also result in that the two of you are growing apart. Is this a risk you're taking, or is it a chance? I think it's important not to be afraid of the risk of growing apart. To me, it's definitely more loving to let your partners grow freely than to hold them back.
Are there parts of you that you've only recently started to accept or reclaim?
One thing I try to handle right now is that I tend to make comparisons and aim for some sort of balance between me and my partner or partners. I realize that this usually has to do with my own insecurity or expectations I've taken with me from earlier relationships. It is not an act out of love. I often try to change myself or the situation in ways that haven't been what my partners actually want from me, instead of listening to their actual needs. So, what I try to do is listen to my partner's needs and to stand up for my own needs, not to make assumptions of what my partner wants and not trying to do or be something that I'm not actually comfortable with.
How do you navigate conflict, repair, or distance in relationships today?
I'm trying to be a really good listener who don't interrupt and break in with personal reflections and examples. This has been quite difficult for me. When me or my partner wants to bring up something difficult or sensitive, we sometimes begin by telling if we want to be heard, helped, or hugged. I have made the mistakes many times to feel the urge to help, or mostly worse, to explain and justify myself. But to hear the words, I have something to say and then I just want to be hugged, have made it easier for me to do just that. A great practice is to have planned conversations without having a current conflict to solve and nothing in particular to repair. I haven't done this a lot, but my experience so far is that this leads to warm and loving conversations that also detect smaller things and solve them before they are turning big.
And finally, what do you long for the most now in a partner, in love, in life?
I'm still a bit of a searcher here, actually. I do long for lasting loves, and I love to be really close to someone, a daily loving contact. But as I mentioned, I am polyamorous and also a bit of a relationship anarchist today. I need from my partners that they have an open mind towards parallel loves and relationships in various and fluid forms. Of course, I want my partners to feel that they are getting the same from me. I know this sounds like having the cake and eating it too, but then why not?
Thank you, Erik. Everyone, this was Erik sharing his story with us in his own words. What struck me the most is the honesty and the courage it takes to look at yourself, to face the moments of shame and fear, and still choose to seek intimacy and connection. If his story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your reflections. You can follow 34 Podcast on Spotify and all major platforms to stay up to date with the next episodes. And maybe, as you listen to Erik's journey, ask yourself, what does love ask of me today? Please share your thoughts in the comments or answer the poll. And if this resonated, like and share it, please. Let's spread this conversation about choosing love over fear and being open and honest with one another. Thank you for being here and see you in the next episode of 34O.